I've lived 61 years on this earth. I've watched people take their last breaths, stitched wounds with trembling hands in the middle of emergency nights, and seen human blood mix with rainwater. But I had never witnessed anything as cruel as what I saw that morning. Harvey had just torn through Bayfield. 3 days of storm, 3 nights of howling wind and water swallowing rooftops. When the first sun finally broke through, people thought it was over. But in this little town by the bay, peace was just the shell of hell. I was clearing the backyard when I heard a strange sound, a dragging noise, slow and heavy. At first I thought it was a piece of tin blown loose by the storm. But no, the sound had rhythm, like someone breathing, fighting to stay alive. I turned, and my heart clenched instantly. There, in the middle of a mud-covered street among broken bricks and tangled power lines, a tiny Doberman puppy was dragging a faded canvas bag with its teeth. The bag was twice its size. Rain had soaked it until it was heavy as stone. Each time the pup pulled it slipped, hit the ground, then struggled back up again. Its neck bled where an old cloth leash had cut through, as if someone had just sliced it off before throwing the animal away. What kind of vile creature could do that, I swear? Only someone with nothing left that resembles a human heart could abandon a living being like that in the middle of a hurricane and walk away. No apology, no reason. Just gone, cold, simple, cruel. I shouted, "Hey baby, come here." Stop. But it didn't stop. It wasn't afraid of people. It didn't need people. It only knew how to pull dragging that bag through puddles across tire tracks over shards of glass that glimmered in the gray sunlight. No whine. No bark. Only weak, steady breathing and the metallic clink of an old hook scraping against the mouth of the bag. I followed. Every step through the mud felt like my heart being torn apart. The puppy staggered forward, tail tucked, eyes wide and locked ahead, as if it knew exactly where it needed to go. Behind me, a neighbor shouted, "Evelyn, stay away from it, that's a stray." I turned and yelled back, my voice breaking, "No, it's not a stray. Someone left it out here and it's just trying to survive." I moved closer, keeping a few meters between us, careful not to scare it. Every time it stopped to breathe, I stopped too. Then it looked at me, those eyes, God, those eyes terrified yet resolute, as if saying, "Don't help. I have to do this myself." I saw its back leg slip. The little body tilted, then fell. The bag toppled over its back, splashing water everywhere. It lay still for a few seconds. I thought it was done. But slowly, painfully, it lifted its head again and tried to pull once more. That was it. I couldn't stand by any longer. I ran. Mud splashed across my clothes, the smell of damp rot filling my nose. I knelt in front of it. The puppy stepped back, panting, trembling, but it didn't run. It just stood there, shaking like a leaf, half wary, half trusting. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, my throat tight. I reached out slowly. It let me touch its head. Its fur was cold as stone, but there was still warmth beneath it. Then finally it let go of the bag. The bag hit the mud with a dull thud. Inside I saw something that froze me to the core, a soaked loaf of bread, a dented can of dog meat, and an old photo smeared with dirt, an elderly man holding this very same puppy in his arms. It hadn't been dragging trash. It had been dragging its memories. When I looked up again, it was already moving on. Not fast, not afraid, just pushing forward as if it knew the way home. On the cracked sidewalk, drops of blood trailed from its neck, blending with the dirty rainwater glinting faintly under the morning sun. I stood there, my hands trembling, watching that fragile little creature fight its way through the wreckage we humans call the world. And I knew I couldn't let it walk alone. I followed, whispering under my breath, "What's in that bag, sweetheart? And who are you trying to find?" I didn't know it then, but those footsteps would lead me into a story I'd remember for the rest of my life. A story you could only call one thing a miracle. My name is Evelyn Carter, 61 years old, a retired intensive care nurse. I spent my whole life standing on the edge between life and death, watching people slip away in white hospital rooms, hearing ventilators cut off in the night like a song God forgot to finish. When I retired, I thought I'd feel at peace, but all I felt was emptiness. Frank, my husband, used to say, "When you're tired, go back to the sea. Out there, every wound knows how to dissolve into the waves." I listened. Last May, I sold our little house in Houston and moved to Bayfield, a small town on the Texas coast I'd only ever heard of by name. An old wooden house with a tin roof, a small porch facing the sea. I thought it would be the place I'd finally find peace. Then Harvey came. The hurricane didn't just tear away rooftops, it stripped bare the weakness I'd tried so hard to hide. 3 days, 3 nights, the wind screamed through the boards like the cries of someone buried alive. When the storm passed, the world around me was no longer the world I knew. Trees uprooted power out water everywhere, the smell of mud and gasoline mixing into something like the earth's rotting breath. I stepped out onto the porch, my feet sinking into the wet wood. It felt like stepping on the corpse of a dream that had just been killed. No cars, no people. Only silence, a thick, heavy kind of silence where you could hear your own heartbeat. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe it was the instinct of someone who had seen life at its most fragile. I heard the dragging sound, and then I saw it. A small Doberman, black and tan skin and bone legs trembling. It was dragging a faded canvas bag across a street littered with debris. No one around, no voice calling its name. Just the puppy alone in the wreckage carrying something heavier than its own body. I ran after it, mud splattering up my clothes. When it fell, my heart fell with it. I've told you I've seen people dying, but I'd never seen an animal fight death so bravely. When I lifted it, my hands touched the blood around its neck. It looked up at me, eyes brimming with water, not from fear, but from pain. Not the kind of pain you fix with medicine, but the kind you feel when someone who promised to protect you leaves. I held it close. Its body was light as a soaked towel. It didn't struggle, just breathed in short gasps, eyes slowly closing in my arms. I whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here now." I didn't know if I was talking to the dog or to myself. I carried it back to the porch and wrapped it in an old blanket. That's when I really saw the bag, the thing it had dragged all the way down the street. Inside was a soaked loaf of bread, a dented can of dog food, and a photograph, an old man holding this same puppy when it was even smaller. I froze. My hands shook. It hadn't been dragging trash. It had been dragging memory. A photograph, a clue, a question with no answer yet. I looked down the street it had crawled through, every inch of mud and ruin it had fought across to bring this back. Not far away, at the end of the road, there was a small wooden house with half its roof torn off and the front door hanging open. I saw a figure inside, an old man, thin, leaning against the doorframe, staring out as if waiting. Then he called, voice trembling but sure, "Rex." The puppy's ears twitched. It opened its eyes, lifted its head, and with all the strength it had left, scratched lightly at the blanket, as if to say, "Yes, it's me." I looked toward the old man, and in that moment among the wreckage, something invisible connected the three of us, a widowed woman searching for meaning, a lonely old man waiting for a miracle, and a small broken puppy who had just carried the past back into the world. I stood up, holding it close, stepping through puddles toward that house. The wind stung my face, sharp and cold, but my heart burned warm. I didn't know what awaited me. All I knew was this: some things don't need reason. You just have to let your heart recognize them. Henry Lawson's house sat at the end of the street right by the bay, where salt water still clung to the brick steps. Half the roof was gone, the windows shattered, and the smell of mildew, salt, and diesel hung in the air like the storm's leftover breath. When I stepped inside, the old man looked at me, voice trembling but his eyes bright. "You found him." I thought I'd lost him. I nodded, tightening my hold on the small dog in my arms. He was barely conscious, chest rising weakly, skin cold, pulse slow, breathing uneven. Instinct took over. The nurse in me moved before my mind did. I need a dry blanket, warm water, and something that can hold heat. Henry stumbled into the next room and returned with an old army blanket and a chipped enamel bowl. I laid Rex on the table, wiped away the mud with a cloth, and pressed my fingers gently against his tiny chest. 1, 2, 3. His chest lifted, then fell again. No response. I gasped, pressed once more, my voice breaking into a whisper that was half a prayer. "Come on, baby. You've made it this far. Don't stop now." A faint cough. Then another. He trembled, opened his mouth, and spat out a mouthful of muddy water. Henry exhaled sharply, both hands on his head. Good boy. Oh, good boy. He was alive. Just that, but to us it was a miracle. I dripped a bit of honey onto his tongue to raise his blood sugar. Henry sat beside me, hands shaking as he poured water from the bowl, spooning it drop by drop into the puppy's mouth. He swallowed, slow but steady. 3 hours later, he finally drifted into sleep. We sat in silence. The wind whistled through the broken window frame, making the flashlight beam sway, its dull yellow glow falling across his tiny face. A small, battered creature, but still here between two people who had almost stopped believing. Henry spoke softly, his voice cracking. "I found him by the docks 2 months ago. Someone left him in a cardboard box with a note that said, 'Too loud, can't keep.' I don't know why I chose him. Maybe because I was left behind once too." I looked at him, tired eyes, but warm. The kind of warmth that only comes from those who've been lonely long enough to understand what love costs. He went on. "When the storm came, the water flooded the backyard. I took him into the storage room. I thought it'd be safer there. Then the door blew open. The waves came in. He barked, tried to pull me out, but I fell. I remember shouting his name, then nothing. I knew that feeling, the helplessness of watching the only thing you love be taken away while you can do nothing. I gently stroked Rex's head. "He found his way back," I said quietly. 3 days, dragging a heavy bag through mud, through debris, just to come home. To you." Henry said nothing. Tears fell onto his calloused hands. "I'm old Evelyn. I didn't think anyone needed me anymore. But maybe he thinks differently." We both laughed softly through tears. I stayed by Rex all night. Every breath he took felt like my own heartbeat. I didn't sleep, just listened to the rain hitting the torn metal roof and to the fragile sound of life refusing to die. Around 3 in the morning, he stirred. Tiny legs trembled. His head tilted to one side, then his eyes opened. That look, I'll never forget it. No fear, no pain, just faith. The kind of faith we adults had long forgotten. He licked my hand once, then closed his eyes again. Henry smiled in the dark. "He's a fighter," he whispered, "a real one." I looked at him, at both of them, and felt my heart, dry and silent for so many months, begin to beat again. Slow, steady, alive. In a town stripped of faith by the storm, a tiny miracle was breathing evenly on an old wooden table. A small creature once thrown away had just won its life back, and somehow I knew it was also giving life back to us. The next morning broke in a pale gray sky, the kind of fragile light after a storm people call the light of survivors. Henry's house was still damp and cold, but in that small kitchen there was a strange warmth, the warmth of a living being just pulled back from the hands of death. Rex lay curled inside a wool blanket, his head resting on my hand. His breathing was steadier now, weak but even. Each time his chest rose, it felt like my own heart learning how to beat again. Henry was brewing coffee on a makeshift gas stove. The smell of it mixed with salt air oil smoke and mildew, a mix both unpleasant and comforting, as if reminding us that life always hides somewhere inside the world's mess. He handed me a cup, his hand shaking. "You did what I couldn't," he said quietly. "I thought I was too old to save anyone." I shook my head. "No, you're the one he came back for. I just walked him halfway home." Rex stirred. I looked down and saw him try to lift his head, brown eyes opening, tired but aware. That look stopped me cold, not fear, not confusion. Just the gaze of a child waking from a nightmare, realizing someone has stayed beside him all along. I dipped my finger into the warm water and touched it gently to his lips. He licked once, then exhaled a tiny sigh that sounded like thank you. Henry leaned closer and whispered, "Good boy. You made it home." His voice was rough, trembling like wind through a broken door, but inside it was something I hadn't heard since the day my husband died, hope. We cared for him together over the next few days. No power, no vet, just old knowledge and fragile faith. I boiled warm water. Henry lit the fire in the iron stove. Every morning, Rex took a few spoonfuls of thin porridge, and each time he looked at us, his eyes said, "I'll try a little more." On the 5th day, he stood. Legs shaking, head low, but he stood. I held my breath. Henry did too. 1 step, 2, then 3. He fell, but didn't cry. Just lifted his head, eyes fierce with stubbornness. I laughed, tears rolling down my cheeks. "You stubborn little thing," I said, tapping his nose. "Just like your old man." Henry smiled soft and proud. "That's my boy." One afternoon, the sun finally appeared for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. The breeze off the bay carried a new kind of salt, clean, not heavy. Rex stood on the porch, his fur dry now, a faint red mark still on his neck but already healing. He stared out toward the same sea that had once taken him. I stepped beside him. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I said softly. He looked up at me, then back at the horizon as if to agree. And in that quiet moment I understood what I hadn't been brave enough to face for months. I hadn't just saved a dog. I was learning how to live again. Because in every small act, feeding him spoon by spoon, brushing his fur, I could hear Frank's voice whisper in my ear, "Keep believing, Eve. Everything finds its way home." By the 10th day, Rex was walking around the backyard. His tail wagged lightly, his gait still fragile but proud. I watched Henry sitting on the steps, a cup of coffee in hand, his eyes following the pup, the way a father watches a child take his first steps. The wind swept through the porch, lifting torn sheets of tarp, but inside that house, I could feel something Bayfield hadn't known for weeks: peace. Rex stopped by Henry's feet and lay his head on the old man's knee. They looked at each other for a long time, saying nothing. Then he turned to me, eyes warm as amber, and I knew he remembered me. He chose me. Henry smiled. "Seems like you've got competition, Evelyn." I laughed, though my throat tightened. Because deep down I knew what Rex had brought back that day wasn't just food or a photograph. He'd brought back faith, the kind I thought the storm had carried away with Frank. And in that first sunlight after the storm, as Rex lifted his head ears high, eyes fixed on the distance, I heard myself whisper, "Welcome back, little one. You made it through the storm." Autumn came slowly to Bayfield. After the storm, the sky never seemed brave enough to clear. Completely gray clouds still drifted overhead, and the wind carried moisture and the low hum of the sea as if to remind us that peace is always temporary. And I was right, because only a few weeks later, Henry fell ill. He started coughing a simple cold at first. I made him ginger tea, cooked chicken soup, and told him to rest. But soon his breathing grew heavy, the fever wouldn't break, and I heard that wheezing sound I'd learned too well from years in the ICU. Pneumonia. And for an old man after a storm, it was as dangerous as a second wave. I took him to the temporary hospital in Houston. Before we left, he gripped my hand, his skin cold and thin as paper. "If I don't make it back," he whispered, "take care of him for me, will you?" I couldn't answer because Rex began to bark, the first sound I'd ever heard from him. It was small, hoarse trembling, but full of protest, as if he understood that someone was about to leave. I knelt down and stroked his head. "He's coming back, baby, I promise." The days that followed were the longest nights since the hurricane. Rex never left the door. He lay right at the threshold, head resting on Henry's old shoes, waiting. At first I thought he'd forget, but he didn't. He waited. For 7 days. He didn't eat, didn't play, just stared down the empty road where we'd driven Henry away, as if by looking long enough he could bring him back. Every night I sat beside him, 1 cup of tea for me, 1 bowl of warm water for him. We didn't speak, 2 souls left behind, waiting for something that might never return. On the 3rd night, rain fell again. The wind rose, water swept across the porch, and still Rex wouldn't come inside. I wrapped him in a blanket and sat beside him. He trembled but didn't move, his eyes fixed on the distance into a darkness where I saw only rain, but he saw faith. I whispered, "You miss him, don't you?" He tilted his head and pressed his nose against my hand. A small gesture, but I understood. He missed him, and he hurt. Just like I did. On the 6th night, I dreamed of Frank. He stood on the shore, 1 hand on my shoulder, his smile faint as fog. "Don't be afraid to love again," he said. "That's how we stay alive." I woke with a start, cold sweat running down my neck. Outside, Rex was barking short, shaky, urgent. I ran to the porch. Dawn was breaking. On the wet road, an ambulance had stopped. The door opened, and Henry stepped out. Thinner, but alive. Rex bolted forward, mud flying, barking wildly, then threw himself against him, paws clinging to his legs, nose pressed into his chest as if to make up for every second they'd been apart. Henry laughed, tears spilling down his collar. "I told you I'd come back, boy. Didn't I?" I stood in the doorway, hand over my mouth, tears burning hot. All the fear, the loneliness, the grief of these past years dissolved in that single fragile moment. Because in this world, some things, no matter how small, still find their way home. That night, after Henry fell asleep, Rex lay between us, his head resting on Henry's arm, his paw draped across my knee. I looked at the 2 of them, 1 old, 1 young, and felt my heart grow quiet. Nothing lasts forever. I know that. But some things, if you love them deeply enough, stay just in another form. And in that little wooden house in the calm after the storm, I heard the sound of Rex's breathing blending with Henry's steady slow at peace. A melody I once thought I'd never hear again. 3 weeks after Henry came home, Bayfield began to breathe again. Grass pushed through the cracks. The houses started to rebuild their frames, and out on the bay, the sound of the waves no longer carried that desperate gasp. It sounded alive again. But if you asked me what truly changed this town, I wouldn't say it was the government or the relief efforts or the money. I'd say it was a puppy. Rex. Word spread fast about the little dog that dragged a bag through the flooded streets after the storm. People told the story in coffee shops, at gas stations, in church pews, and with every retelling that bag somehow grew heavier. Sometimes it carried food, sometimes medicine, sometimes hope. But no matter how the tale changed, the real miracle stayed the same. He had survived, and he had come back. One Sunday morning, while I was watering the plants on the porch, Rex trotted out to the yard, tail wagging, a pair of old gardening gloves clutched in his mouth. I laughed. "Thank you, sweetheart, but I don't need any more of those." He set the gloves down, looked up at me, the look of a creature who believes every gift has meaning. That afternoon, Henry knocked on my door. He leaned on his cane, wearing the same old jacket I kept begging him to wash. "You heard the news." "What news?" "They're holding a community cookout at the elementary school yard. Whoever's got food left in their freezers bringing it out to grill." "You coming?" I almost said no. I've never been one for crowds. But Rex was wagging his tail as if he understood the invitation himself. I looked at Henry, then at him. Maybe it's time. That evening, the Texas sky burned gold. The schoolyard was full. Long tables stretched across the grass, the air thick with the smell of grilled meat and coffee. Children ran in circles, their laughter ringing out like a kind of music Bayfield had forgotten it could make. Henry and I sat together, Rex lying between us, wearing the red bandana I'd washed clean. He looked proud, calm, almost human in the way he rested there. A man from the rescue team walked over, pointing. "Is that the puppy? The one who dragged the bag?" I nodded. "That's him." He smiled, shaking his head. "You know, I've seen towns fall apart after storms. But this little guy..." He bent down, scratching Rex's head. He brought back something none of us could. Henry murmured, his eyes glistening hope. For a moment, the whole table went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then everyone. I looked at Rex. He had no idea what was happening, only tilted his head, tail wagging softly. But I knew. It wasn't applause for a dog. It was applause for humanity, for the kindness we thought the storm had washed away. When night fell, someone brought out a guitar. People sang the old songs, "Stand By Me," Amazing Grace melodies that carried both tears and rebirth. Rex lay at my feet, his head resting on my knee. Henry sat beside me, eyes closed, humming along. The wind from the bay rolled in, carrying the scent of salt, and for the first time since Frank died, I felt like I was home. I don't know who first called Rex the miracle of Bayfield. Maybe it was Henry. Maybe the elementary school teacher who saw him dragging that bag through the mud. But whoever said it first was right, because in a broken world, a small living soul reminded us that goodness still knows the way back. As we left the schoolyard, Henry said softly, "You see, Evelyn, maybe storms don't just destroy. Maybe they bring the right ones together." I looked at him, then at Rex running ahead, his red bandana fluttering in the sunset, and nodded. Maybe they do.